What's up, folks, and welcome to Indie Ramble. We're back in the modern retro mines today. Oh yes, you know I love this, and I've got another action platformer for you guys today that's kind of interesting. It's a mix of a few older titles that people will certainly recognize from back in the day, but it's kind of got its own spin on it as well. And I overall like it, except for one caveat, which we'll get to later. So this is Prison City. And I've been keeping my eye on this for a little while, actually. I first found a demo for it on a Steam Next Fest quite a while ago. And it's one of those games that very much looks of the NES era, but it does a few things here and there that would push it a little bit past that. But it is nonetheless very much evoking that era. And I've been having a lot of fun with this, actually. So I'm quite a bit further ahead in my game, so I'm going to start this game here where I've completed the intro mission and we get to the sort of meat of it. And well, you're going to look at this screen right here and it's going to seem instantly familiar. This is going to seem a lot like a Mega Man game. You have a bunch of different stages that you can choose to attack in any order, and you have to get through all of these first before you end up dealing with the sort of main antagonist of the game. The idea behind this is that it's an alternative history where back in the 90s, Detroit was completely abandoned and turned into a giant penal colony. And a bunch of stuff's going down there and you got to try to quell it, is essentially what's going on. It's like a robot uprising, basically. So I'll pick a random thing here. And you're going to see how this is Mega Man-ish, but not entirely. It feels a little bit like maybe Mega Man and Contra, and this guy's weapon almost feels a little Strider-ish. It's an interesting blend of things. And so, and that's what's interesting about this is while you do have a number of stages that you can attack in any order, the thing about Mega Man games, right, is that you get a special weapon pickup from each boss. And there's actually an ideal sort of boss order to approach with the Mega Man games because every boss in the game is weakest to another particular boss's weapon. So that's kind of the idea behind it, is that you want to try to, you can take out every boss with your regular gun if you want, but you really want to focus on specializing in figuring out the best order and using each boss strengths and weaknesses against them. Well, in this you don't have that. This sort of weird boomerang weapon here that you see that I'm using now, that's it. That's all you get. The bosses don't drop special weapons, and the order in which you attack the levels is really down to personal preference, because you're not going to find one easier than the other based on things that you may pick up from the boss. What you can do in the levels is, you see that little power up I picked up right there, and there's a thing in the upper left corner now under my my energy meter. Well, if you can find all three of those in the level, you'll effectively double your attack power of your weapon, so it does a lot more damage. But if you take 3 hits, you lose it completely, and you can only get that once per level. That's the majority of the upgrades in this. So it's much more pure, I guess you'd say, in that it really is down to you and your platforming and combat ability alone, as opposed to getting specialized weapons and attacking bosses in certain orders. Now, some people are going to say that that's quite a bit of a downgrade over what the Mega Man games did, indeed, back in the actual NES era. I think some people are not going to like the fact that this has a more simplified approach to it. And that's fair. I can understand that. I kind of, as someone who is a big fan of the Mega Man series, I actually kind of like it. I kind of like the simplicity that this is offering, and that it is based more around individual skill and not trial and erroring your way through figuring out a boss order, or like most people would probably do these days, just, you know, finding a guide online that tells you what order to approach. You do occasionally as well pick up things like grenades, which is a simple weapon that will clear most low enemies off the screen immediately and will do damage to higher end enemies, including the bosses if you want. Now you can see here that each level has a map. So this is not a Metroidvania. The maps are a little bit more open, but there are different ways you can approach them, and you don't have to complete an entire map in order to finish a level. In each level, what you have to do is find an individual who has basically the key to allow you to open the door to the boss, and then you go to the boss itself. You're going to see here that little red room in the bottom left corner where I walk past a doorway. That was the door to the boss, but I don't have the key yet, so I can't go in there. So I got to find that person, and there they are right here. And so there's a little bit of a text thing that goes on here. These are pretty meaningless. You can largely skip them. Your character barely says anything. But if you do choose to explore these levels a little bit more, there are sometimes additional power-ups and things that you can pick up. I believe each level does have a sort of larger permanent progression or upgrade that you can get if you're willing to put in the time to find it. Some of them are quite hard to get to, others are not. And the thing is, you've got to do the whole level in one set of lives. So if you choose to go exploring, you're taking an inherent risk by doing that, by potentially not having as many lives when you get to the boss. There are continues available in this. Well, there's retries available in this. There are checkpoints, which you've seen me cross there before, that will there are checkpoints that will allow you to respawn in those places, but if you lose all your lives, the level starts over. So you got to be really careful of that. And as you can see here as well, there are I actually did max power up my weapon there, but then I lost it because I took a few hits. So you also do have somewhat of a fair amount of directional control over your weapon. As you can see, you can also use the left and right bumpers on your controller to automatically angle it up and down like that too, which can make it a little bit easier to do that. Also, it has this cool thing. If you hold the fire button out, your boomerang sort of hangs in the air, and you can actually redirect its direction temporarily around to sort of clear enemies around you. I found I never had to use that very much. And now we get to the boss, and this is what's really cool, is the bosses in this are all unique. They all look different, they all act different, they all have very different attacks that you have to deal with. These are really the stars of the show. There are a lot of different enemies that you will run into. Now, I was almost dead there, so that's fine, but I'll come back with more health now. There are a number of different enemies, standard enemies, that you will run into over the course of the game, but these bosses are really the star of the show. Really, as most people would say, as they are in Mega Man as well. Now, you're also going to see there, with regards to my weapon, the strategy I learned about this boss, you're going to see there that I have a weapon power meter, and it recharges very quick. What's cool about this thing is that you can fire this thing as fast as you can mash the button, which can be advantageous, but you don't want to overdo it, because that weapon meter dictates how much damage your weapon is going to do on impact. So if you fire fast, you're going to lose some strength on it. And so that's a bit of a trade-off. You got to be like, do you want to fire fast, or do you want to do a lot of damage per hit? And depending on the enemy and the encounter, you know, there may be different types of ways you want to utilize it. But so while the game will allow you to button mash, it doesn't necessarily always reward that. That's not always the best. That's not always the best strategy. So I kind of like that. It makes things a little bit different in terms of how it. There we go. It makes things a little bit different in terms of how you approach things like that. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to actually back out to the level select, even though I was working my way on that boss, so I can show you another level here, because all the levels are very different. They're very different kinds of environments. That was kind of the fire level. You've got an ice level here. You've got a level that takes place not entirely, but partially on like a motorcycle type thing. The environments mix up a lot, and that's one of the things that's cool. It really keeps it fresh. The game has this really interesting color palette that it takes to it. It's very sort of 8-bit cyberpunk type of thing, but each level very much has its own distinctive visual style and flair to it. They really took the time to make each level really distinct and very much have its own personality and its own aesthetic to it, which I like. Nothing in this feels copy and pasted, not even close. You know, there are enemies that are unique to each level, to certain individual levels. There are enemies that are commonplace as well, like these sort of ice picker things here. Obviously, these are very much unique to this type of level, right? And so it keeps things fresh, which I really like. Even though you don't have the variety of weapons and power-ups that you would have in a Mega Man game, you definitely get a lot of cool environmental things that really make things different. So yeah, I really like the look of this, and honestly, the soundtrack for this game is just banger after banger. It's killer tracks the whole way through. In terms, it uses a lot of that. I call it the Konami guitar sample. I don't know if that's not what it really is, but a lot of the samples in this game are very reminiscent of stuff you would have heard from Konami games back in the day, and they are used to great effect. I think the music in this is absolutely top shelf and really adds to the atmosphere and the fast pace of things really well. I like that a lot. Now, the other thing you might be asking is, well, if this is styled after one of these old school 8-bit platformers, how hard is it? Well, there's multiple difficulties, which is nice. On the easy setting, well, it's pretty easy. I'm on normal here, which is definitely not as hard as the original titles that this is seeking to emulate. You know, a lot of the old school 80s stuff definitely was a lot harder than this on normal. And there is an expert level as well that does make it more akin to that. But I found that there were only a couple of levels that I had to retry entirely because I ran out of lives trying to fight the boss. Most of the time I was able to get through it without too much trouble. But I'm not going to call this game easy. It is definitely not easy. It is challenging, especially if you don't have a lot of experience with platformers of this type. I think you are going to find it quite a bit more challenging than modern games, but as someone who's a fan of these, I found this challenging but not punishing, which was nice. However, you may have heard me say at the beginning that there's one little caveat, and yes, that little caveat is the last level. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything. Don't worry about it. I mean, the story to this is a very 8-bit story. It's not that significant, but the last level is a giant slog. It's a very large level where you have to traverse. It's the biggest level in the game by far, and you have to traverse this very large area trying to find a bunch of things that you have to do stuff with. It took me, I bet, over an hour to find my way through it all. And when you do that, you then have to fight a 2-stage boss. The first stage of which isn't too hard, but the second stage of which is quite hard. The game throughout that last level actually was pretty generous with extra lives. But when you get to that final boss fight, it's not. And if you fail that boss fight, you have to do that entire level over again. The whole bloody thing. And I got really frustrated at that point. I was really enjoying this game up until that point, and I was like, you're not even going to let me continue from that final boss after putting me through that hour-long grind. I literally said out loud, and I was here by myself, I literally said out loud, yeah, screw you, and put the controller down. I do still want to finish this. I am going to try that level again, but that put a really bad taste in my mouth. That's where the game went from challenging to just petty, is what it felt like to me. Now, not everyone's going to agree with that. A lot of people are going to, tell me, well, if you played Mega Man back in the day, you know how tough these things can be. And you're not wrong. But with the way Mega Man handle continues, I would say it was actually more fair than this game is in that last level to me. That was the only thing that really bugged me, though. And it's a shame because up to that point, I really enjoyed this. And that last level was cool. Like, I actually did feel fairly accomplished when I completed it, especially because I did it on my first go. I was like, sweet, this is really great. And I got to that boss and I went, all right. I went into that boss with a lot of lives, and I was like, okay, I think I can handle this. And then I didn't make it, and I went, okay, well, it'd probably be fine. I'll wait for it to do I'll wait for it to continue. And you put me back where? Yeah, that just felt a little bit too much for me. But other than that, I've been enjoying this. The other problem I have, this boss here, you basically have to play Pong with it. It's ridiculous, but really cool and clever and innovative. And I like that. Actually, it took me a couple of tries to beat this guy too. He gets tough later. The only other thing I'm going to say about this, and you've probably seen it a little bit here already, is that this game does have a sort of grappling mechanic where you have to jump up and grab onto the edge of platforms in order to sort of vault yourself up, right? I do not like it. There have been other people complaining about this too. It's way too finicky. I find too many times I've lost lives because I missed a grab where I very clearly did it right. And then in other times, you know, I will do the exact same thing and it works. It demands way too much, I think, frame precision. I think it should be more generous with that grappling mechanic in terms of determining when you hit it. That's been my only real gripe with the otherwise quite tight controls in this game, is that the grapple is just, the grapple's just not there. It needs to have a few more frames to be able to grab it. I think it needs to be less precise because this isn't a precision platformer. It's not designed to be. It's an action platformer, and that one thing I think makes it a little bit much for me. But those two things are my only real gripes. I mean, regarding that last level thing, I wouldn't have a problem with it being like that on the expert difficulty, but on the normal difficulty, it ratcheted, it made the games difficult to a degree where if it was like that earlier on, I think it would have turned players off. And it kept it, you know, it went from challenging but easier than old school to just old school mean, and for no real reason that I can find. I don't like difficulty. I don't like it when there's a difficulty cliff like that. I think that was I don't like that design choice, but I've come this far in this game, so I am going to figure out my way through it. You know, I got to the second stage of the boss fight, and I think I know what I needed to do, but I was also having a problem with the slide control not always responding as well as I think it should have, and that was another problem I had at certain points in the game, though far less often than the grapple. But yeah, I mean, if you're willing to accept that you're probably going to have to work pretty hard for that last level, I honestly really enjoy this. I think the visual and audio experience in this is fantastic. I think they did a great job on that. I like the level variety. I like that it mixes up genres almost like this does. I like how different the environments are. I like how they're all distinct. There's a ton of enemy variety in this, some great boss variety, and it's got that cheesy 8-bit style story that you don't need anything more complicated than that in a game like this. You know, it's like, hey, Detroit got turned into a large prison colony and the robots are going crazy. Yeah, I'm cool with that. That's all I need. Let's go. And I think they did do a really good job with it, other than those odd couple of control and difficulty spike things. It's been very good. I've had a good time with it. It's not super long on the medium difficulty, unless you are you know, someone who's maybe not as experienced with this genre of game. But especially if you want to go through every level and find all the collectibles and 100% everything, it will definitely take you longer than that. And that could be beneficial later on. You know, that last level maybe wouldn't have been so hard if I'd taken the time to get everything here as well. There are achievements in this as well, but I'm going to tell you this. I only have one level left to go, and I haven't earned a single one yet. Some of the achievements are secret in this, and a lot of the ones that aren't are like, do these things without taking damage, like that kind of thing, where so even the achievements in this game is going to make you work for them, because I'll be curious if I even get an achievement for finishing the game. It's one of those kinds of things where it doesn't think some games, you know, think achievements are a thing that you should just hand out. Other games are like, no, we're gonna actually make you earn. We're gonna make you earn the name achievement. That's what this one seems to do as well. So, interesting mix of really old school hard but then also, you know, more modern difficulty as well. It's kind of a cool fusion, but that's what I like about it. And yeah, if you like old school games like this, definitely recommend giving this a look. No question. I've had a good time with it, and I am gonna, you know, I'm not gonna let it win. Hell no, I'm gonna totally finish this up. But it's been a good time, and I think old school fans should definitely check it out. So that is Prison City. It is out now. Yeah, good time. Just, you know that if you're a person who's prone to break controllers, maybe have a spare or two on hand for that last level. So thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate it. If you like what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things. Those do help out a great deal. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, does this game interest you? What are other old school platformers, either from back in the day that you remember fondly, or other modern retro titles like this that you remember? There's a lot of them out there, and I'd love to hear some of those. And you can also follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction. I'm going to be focusing more on actual retro games there for a while, actually, covering what I call the deep backlog. So that should be a fun time there. And we have a great little community over there, and I'd love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again, everybody, and I'll see you in the next Indie Ramble. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.